Hey everybody! You got to watch Dennis dance for a second there. Uh,
I'm feeling. I'm in the zone. Anyway, do your thing.
hey everybody! Welcome back to Let's Get Pairing. This is episode 34, and we're smoking. I'd show you the band as I usually do, but these are unbanded. This is the Fabrica5 MOFOH. We'll get into it. We'll talk about it. Talk about what we're pairing. But for now, grab yourself a cigar, grab yourself a drink. Let's get pairing. Song.
No,
All right,
no, it's
guys.
really inappropriate.
Yeah, I know. We're back. Welcome back. This is Let's Get Pairing episode 34. Friends of Habanos, Fabrica5, rather, MOFOH. FO is FOH for Friends of Habanos. We'll talk about that in a minute. But for now, I'm your host, Trip, here at the Casa de Monte Cristo studios. As with my co-host, as always, getting ready to audition for a circus strongman is my man, Dennis. Dennis, how you doing?
Howdy doody. Doing good, man. I'm feeling good. Surprisingly for a Sunday. Normally I feel less enthused, if you will, but your presence always brings it back. I feel like this is my happy space. So I'm
Good.
happy to be on.
Glad to hear it. Yeah, I was gonna say this is my happy space too, but yeah, I just agree. How about that? All right, the cigar we're smoking is the MOFOH Spada Gorda. So we'll talk a little bit about where this brand came from, called Fabrica5, or Fabrica5, if you're pronouncing correctly. It was founded by Friends of Habanos founder Rob Ayala, along with famed Cuban cigar maker Hamlet Paredes, who many people know because of his involvement in Rocky Patel and the line with his name on it a couple years ago. He's a cool guy.
I can think, yeah. Hamlet and I have a very personal relationship.
Yeah?
Not one that's. I shouldn't bring it up. But yeah, we have a relationship. That's fine.
We'll talk about it off the air. I gotta
Hamlet,
know the story.
if you're watching, reach out. We'll chat. Reconcile differences.
All right, so a little background on Friends of Habanos. Started in 1996 when Rob kind of started importing Cuban cigars for sale. He was, I believe he called it parallel piracy in an interview that I read. Basically, he was buying Cuban cigars from elsewhere, selling them in Australia in kind of a, not necessarily a black market, but a gray market kind of way. In 2004, he added a online forum to the website as just kind of a place for his clients to interact with each other, talk about, what they're smoking, what they're liking, what they recommend, what they got from Rob recently, and it took off. I know we were both in the forum scene back in the day, and people were all over Friends of Habanos. It's always been kind of the spot for Cuban cigar talk, and a place to get Cuban cigars. Over the years, it's become really one of the primary online resources for Cuban cigar smokers all around the world, not just for chatting, but they have guides on counterfeiting. They have very, very intense articles on what to look for if you think the cigar that you have may be a counterfeit. Going to Friends of Habanos is never a bad idea.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the forum. I have been for many years. And honestly, for me, especially growing up kind of in the scene and exploring cigars and Cuban cigars, their knowledge base is incredible. And the people are so nice.
There's a lot of absolute experts over there.
Yeah, man. And people are really nice about getting back to you if you have a question. They don't just. It's not, unfortunately, I have to say this, it's not what Reddit is today. You can go there and you can ask a question. People will actually be genuine about trying to help you understand what the answer might be. They're just great. So if you haven't checked it out, I would highly recommend you go on there and chat with some people.
But be aware, as the name implies,
yes,
it's really about Habanos. You're not going to get very far talking to them about the latest Rocky Patel or whatever. All right, so Hamlet, let's go over his story a little bit. So at 17, he apparently was getting ready to go to school for to be a doctor, and didn't want to. So he went and got a job moving boxes around at the Paredes factory. He talked about how his parents really taught him that if you're not number one, you don't matter, especially in Cuba. And so after about a year of moving boxes around at the factory, he started rolling Lusitanas, and that became which was at the time the number one cigar or job in the factory, according to him. And so he was pumped about that. So over the years, he became kind of known as one of the best rollers in Cuba. He became kind of the I don't know, what do you call it? The cover model roller for Cuba. He was
The poster boy.
poster
And
boy.
he was very young at that too. Like for him to come in and do what he was doing at that age was also a really big deal because up until that point, the level of skill required, and you ended up seeing people much older than him doing that kind of
Yeah,
job.
he talked about in one of the interviews. He talked about how he was 17 or actually 18 when he started rolling, and the people next to him were a little bit older than him, but they had been rolling cigars since they were like 12 as their job. And so he came really late to the game, but stepped it up. So he became kind of the face of Cuban cigar rolling, and he would do events for Habanos all over the world. Kind of those. I mean, we've all seen them. We've all heard of them. They're kind of hard to come by, but the events where there's somebody rolling cigars, he would do that for Habanos. So he would be all over the world in Casa del Habanos rolling cigars with Cuban tobacco, just live at the shop. Of course, he became known all over the world for this. At one of these events in Europe, he met Rocky Patel, and Rocky Patel was like, if you ever want a job, let me know. So at some point, he took him up on that. In 2015, Hamlet joined Rocky Patel and left Cuba. And I lost my spot in my notes. But anyway, I'm going mostly off the dome.
If you will.
Yeah, he came out with the Tabaquero series, or
Yeah, I love
Hamlet
that. I
series,
love that very
Tabaquero.
much.
I still have like half a box of
Huge fan.
those. I almost
Huge fan.
smoked one today after doing all this research. And yeah, and I should also mention that he has not only gained fame because of his, being the face of Habanos. A lot of it is because he's been known, or he was really well known in the 2010 to 2015 era for Cuban custom rolls. Which, if you go to Cuba, you can get some custom rolls, and his were regarded as some of the best. So I think after he left Rocky Patel, it seems like maybe kind of a no-brainer for Rob to partner up with him. They had known each other for years, of course. Hamlet knows anybody who's been to Cuba, basically, right?
It's a very tight knit community. The Cuban crew, very tight knit between the rollers, the people on the fields and the farms that are actually getting the tobacco together. They're blending, getting you the tobacco. It's a handful of people. You could probably name on one hand the key people that have been pushing the industry forward to where it is today.
Wow.
And absolutely, he is one of those people. He's been keeping his ear to the ground from my experience and everything that I know about him. Yeah, it's just really it's a very cool thing. Like, again, he's one of those guys, really very much like a couple of people you and I have met, Trip, actually in our travels, that can pick up a bunch of tobacco and immediately know, just touching it, immediately know where it's going in a cigar.
Yeah.
And how it fits.
Yeah, it's an incredible skill to be able to just look at tobacco and be like, I know exactly what that is and what farm it came from, and
Yep.
I know how to use it in a cigar.
Uncle Leo is a great example of that. Right? He's
Oh, absolutely. That guy blew my mind, man. All the times we met him. All right, so that brings us to now. So they started Fabrica5 in 2023, I think, is when the cigars started shipping. I think they were kind of started on it a couple years before that, just kind of working on blends and factories and stuff like that. So Rob has now partnered with Hamlet to create kind of a line of cigars designed for consumers who are used to smoking pretty much only Cubans or Cuban custom rolls. In the next few years, all of those are starting to get harder to find. There's a lot of I'm trying to remember there was a big deal earlier this year that Habanos was cutting shipments, and it was basically you have to agree to pay the same price for like 2/3 of what you expect, as far as being a cigar shop, and the rest is going to Southeast Asia, where Cuban cigars are just crazy popular right now. So prices are going up, availability is going down, and it seems like kind of a no-brainer for somebody who's primarily invested in that Cuban community to make their own cigar that appeals to those kind of people. So they have 2 lines in the Fabrica5. They have, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but Desnudos, Puro Desnudo, which means naked cigars. These are kind of inspired by Cuban custom rolls. They have them in a bunch of different sizes. Every few months, they're releasing a couple of sizes, sometimes 1, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 or 4 in a month. Lately, I haven't seen a lot of changes, so I don't know if they're still releasing a couple every month, or every couple months, rather. But then they've also got the MOFOH series. So the Puro Desnudos series is kind of a line of cigars that Hamlet blended in sizes that they like and sizes they think will do well with their customers. MOFOH, on the other hand, is kind of community sourced. So this is a project that's been going on for a couple of years. We know a couple of people who have been involved in the project, where they are coming up with blends, sending them out to Friends of Habanos, members that they trust, and getting feedback, going, all right, how can we change this blend to make it hit your palate better? And they just spent a bunch of time dialing that in, and this is the final product. The one we're smoking is the 2023 edition of the Spada Gorda, which is kind of a Corona Gorda, 5 7/8 by 46. A true Corona Gorda. Not
I'm
that
glad you brought that up.
5.5 by 48
really,
stuff.
That's a really great distinction. True Corona Gorda, yes, we don't see a whole lot of this. It's kind of shifted over the years based on the demographic of cigar smoker that gets into this kind of size. It's gotten a lot smaller, I think, over the years, and it's nice to see kind of like a classic. Like, yeah, this is the Cuban classic. It's kind of cool, and I'm very happy to smoke it.
Yeah, and these cigars really just come in kind of Cuban classic sizes. They have, I mean, I'm looking at them here. The biggest one I see is a 6 by 52. Most of them are in the 38 to 46 ring gauge range, which is right up our alley. If you're interested, check them out. Check them out at Fabrica005.com. Little shout out to them. What do you think of the cigar so far? Actually, before we get into that, I'll talk about the blend. So the factory is a factory in Honduras. Fillers are Honduran and Nicaraguan, and binder and wrapper are both from Honduras. All right, now what do you think so far?
I am not. All right, so I don't know, 5 minutes into the cigar. I'm struggling to make an assessment just yet. I don't get a whole lot off the bat, and that's fine. This kind of profile, I expect that. I expect the profile to really develop 30, 40 minutes into the cigar.
Yeah.
Very light, very not even bready, but light toasted. That sort of light toffee note is definitely in this. In my mind, when I first lit this, I thought, man, this is very much like a lot of the Bolivar Coronas that I very much loved for many years. Oh, yeah. There's not a whole lot of power. Again, we're talking Cuban territory, right? It's not going to have a whole lot of power to it.
Yeah, not a lot of spice going on, not a lot of intensity. Kind of more elegant, dialed back flavors. I'm getting that breadiness you talked about, just a little bit of kind of a baking spice, black pepper spice, just like a hint of it. a little bit of citrus, and a little bit of some, not much, but some kind of sweetness that I can't put my finger on. Maybe like
There,
candied almonds, like a little bit
yeah,
nutty.
yeah, man. There's a subtle sweetness to it. The citrus part is really interesting. You make a great point. I think there's a good bit of citrus to it, which is surprising because generally a lot of the cigars that you and I smoke don't have that quality to them.
Yeah, agreed.
So maybe, and again, maybe that's why we're picking it out. It's more obvious to us because it's different than what we're used to.
Yeah, for sure. Man, the breadiness is really what sticks out to me, though, which I had read in the description of it and kind of inspired my first pairing. So I'll get
Well,
to that in a moment.
I'm very
Um,
excited.
oh, you should be. This is a good one. I almost missed it, but it's Oktoberfest time. Oktoberfest
Yes.
was a couple weeks ago. I realized last week I was like, shit, I haven't even had an Oktoberfest beer yet. And I went on Total Wine and had some delivered today, which was pretty sweet. This is Warsteiner. Warsteiner? I think it's Warsteiner.
Varshina, yeah.
Great beer.
Love it.
So Warsteiner was founded in 1753. For anyone counting, that's a really long time ago.
That's 1753. It's a whole. It's
Yeah,
old.
that's
It's old.
like they're nearing their 300th anniversary as a brewery. They're in Warstein, Germany, which makes sense. And they've remained under the same ownership, under the Kramer family, since they opened. For 250 years, they've been owned by the same family. And have never, sold out or anything like that. So take that, everybody else. Like, there's nobody else that can say that, I don't think. They're
Not only
currently.
that,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say. Not only that, I'm very excited. I have to say this. I have to because it's Oktoberfest. Well, sorry, Oktoberfest ended. Oktoberfest was end of August, September time. But 1516, Reinheitsgebot, the German purity law, Reinheitsgebot, like they are one of the few hardcore breweries that stick to that and
Yeah.
believe in that. So yes, tell us more about it. It's very exciting. This is a cool story to them.
Oh, I don't have a whole lot. I don't know if I got the whole story because
No, you
my
got the story.
my only other real note is that they're the largest privately owned brewery in Germany. And
That's a big
I
deal.
think it was the 5th best selling brewery in Germany. But this is their Oktoberfest. It's a Marzen lager, as with most Oktoberfest, as opposed to the what's the other style?
Well, you got fest beers, you have Marzens, you have
Well, they call this a fest beer, but this is a
Dunkels.
Marzen. Oh yeah, Dunkel. Dunkel's the other one I was thinking of. A lot of Oktoberfests in the U.S. are usually Dunkels, as opposed to Marzens. I prefer a Marzen. It's a little on the lighter side, nice and bready, a little bit sweet, a little bit hoppy. I love a Marzen. Do you have more intel on Warsteiner that I didn't find?
No, I think you nailed it pretty much.
Okay.
They're very old. They're one of the biggest. Basically, Varshiner, when you see them in the U.S. stores, you think, oh, this is a hokey pokey brewery that was designed to sell to the American audience. No,
Mm-hmm.
man, this is a beer that locals drink, Germans drink, that people grew up with, that people are historically and culturally attached to. They're like, yeah, I remember my grandfather drinking that
Yeah.
years ago in Germany. There's a lot of respect for what they do, and I think a lot of that is lost to the American beer crowd because we're so involved in the IPA scene and whatever else is happening in the US, like milkshake IPAs and all that stuff. We get so involved in that we forget that there's an entire history of beer
Oh yeah.
and beer culture, and Warsteiner is a great example of that because they've been very much the same. As far as we know, they've been the same for the last 300 years. They have stuck with exactly what they have been doing, and they keep doing that, and people really love that. And I think that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, and I'm loving
That
this
history.
beer so far. I'll talk about my pairing notes after you tell us about your first pairing of the night.
Oh boy, mm. It's very there's a bit of curiosity to the fact that you
Oh.
have that beer,
Oh, really?
because I am drinking. Well, where's my? Hold on, let me get my second screen
Did
set.
you notice my light go out at some point during that? I don't know when it went
No,
out.
not at all. Did it go out?
One of them did. I just don't know when it happened.
I
I
tell you
just looked
what,
up and noticed it.
you look just as bright as you always do.
Oh, thank you.
So what I'm drinking, you can't really tell a whole lot, but it's dark. It's some dark stuff. Odd Duck Brewing Company. The shameless plug. Myself and my neighbor are basically Odd Duck Brewing Company, and this is a beer that I brewed. Shit, man, I don't even know. 8 weeks ago, probably, yeah, but it's about 8 weeks. Um, it's a Marzen.
Oh, nice.
Well, so Marzen, dare I say, Marzen Dunkel, truly a Dunkel, if you will. It's a little bit meatier than a Marzen.
Okay.
So the Dunkel style in general is typically what you're looking at is like a deep amber brown kind of color. There's more chocolate notes to it than a Marzen.
Yeah.
So like if you look at a Marzen, you say, all right, that's kind of a dark beer, but it's still fairly light on the body. A Dunkel is more of that chocolate, deep caramel, very kind of sweet in your face. Um, and you're not looking at a whole lot of hop profile. So this one I know for a fact does not have a whole lot of hop profile, and that's okay. It's meant to be on the sweeter side, and I brewed this just kind of like I figured for the season it would be perfect. End of September, early
Yeah.
October. This is a beer that I want to drink. This particular one comes in at five. It's 5.6%. So about right. Generally you'll see Dunkels between 5.7 and 6.8. 6.8 is more of the American style. So you'll see in America if you get like an American brewery that does a Dunkel, it'll be a little bit higher gravity profile,
Yeah.
which is fine. But this is the beer that people don't realize. Like this is a beer that really it's been so classic for so long that it influenced a lot of other beers.
Oh,
So like
yeah.
Schwarzbier is a great example of a beer that took its roots from the Dunkel styles of early Germany. Schwarzbier being well, it's a black beer if you translate it literally, but it's much darker and much more intense. It took its roots from Dunkels and the sweetness of it. It took a lot of the sweetness from it. We talked about the Reinheitsgebot. That's 1516. It's crazy to think about this. Since 1516, there has been a mandate in Germany about what you can or cannot put into a beer. It's very pure. It's very simple, very pure. Barley, water, hops, obviously yeast, but yeast was not part of the law when it first came out.
Really?
It
So it
was
was
not.
just everything had to be naturally fermented?
It was never a part of the official law until years later when they decided, okay, we're going to add yeast to this because again, if you think about it, at the time, it wasn't like today where you can go and you can buy a variety of different yeasts and different shops are doing different things and you can get all kinds of really interesting strains. Back then, it was just yeast or no yeast, and yeast was like, oh yeah, that thing that we leave it outside, it kind of does its thing.
Yeah.
That's what we had back then. As technology developed, as chemistry developed, yeast became a really essential part of the beer making process beyond water. Water is a different thing. Like we can talk about water all day. Water chemistry is very unique in and of itself. But yeast is the second biggest thing. Once you get your water profile down for a beer, if you're talking about classic styles, Reinheitsgebot styles, you're looking at water and then you're looking at yeast. It's not even about the grain so much, or the malt, I should say. It's really not about that. Um, the yeast is what takes that water to the next level and ultimately affects your flavor. A great example of that is if you look at Belgian beer. Belgian beers, their yeast is designed specifically to be stressed. So meaning you take that yeast and you put it into a higher temperature, depending on the brew cycle. beyond your diacetyl rests and whatever else. You take it beyond the brew cycle. You put pressure on that yeast, and at higher temperatures, that yeast is going to produce a different level of flavor, different profile. So for Belgian beers, we talk about that spicy sort of banana, kind of funky black pepper banana flavor.
Mm-hmm.
That comes from the yeast being stressed at higher temperatures, releasing
Huh.
all those esters. And the esters are what we get on the nose when we drink things. Think of like Duvel is a good example.
Yeah.
Karat is another good example. So they finally added yeast as an official thing. And I would argue to say today, when you talk about Reinheitsgebot and breweries that are operating today, their primary focus is not the grain, it's not the hops even, it's not the water, which is interesting. They have gravitated toward just focusing on the yeast, and the yeast is what really is your profile and the character.
Interesting. I never knew that.
Yeah, it's cool, man.
So that's why at the beer store they have like 50, 100 different types of yeast that you can buy.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Biology, man.
Um, I had a question. I can't remember what it was. Oh, what's what's up with the Reinheitsgebot now? Is it still in effect, or is it kind of optional-ish these days? Because I
So
know that there are more American style beers in Germany now, but I don't know if they do the fruited, the adjunct kind of things.
yes, they do. So they do. The beer culture in Germany and in general in Europe has shifted toward this kind of like adjunct style, more interesting. Like think of the
More
Italian
experimentation, right? I mean, like we talked about, Varsteiner has been making beer the same way for 250 years. Um, and
Oh yeah.
just breaking that mold is a big step over there.
So it exists, and I think nowadays more so than in the last probably 50, 60 years. Now when you see a brewery that says, "Hey, we are strictly Reinheitsgebot," this is like a mark of honor for a lot of
Yeah,
them.
that makes sense.
It's because it's significantly harder, and it's harder not because it's actually more difficult. It's harder because the demographic of the beer drinker has access to other beers like IPAs and adjunct beers and a different variety that you didn't see in a lot of European pubs. Really, I
Mm-hmm.
want to say pubs specifically because they're not going to beer stores; they're going to pubs. The exposure to level of beers. This is the first time in the last, really the last uh, 15 years, 18 years, we've seen beers like Italian Pilsners, Italian IPAs,
Yeah.
where they were always Pilsners and they were very crisp and they're very specific. They're very Italian, very kind of like sort of Italian version of Reinheitsgebot. And now we have IPAs and we have adjunct stuff, and you can get a sour. It's crazy. You can get a sour at a German pub. Now it's like a
Okay.
thing.
I didn't
The
know that was a
culture
thing.
the culture
Very
has
interesting.
changed. So now, in a sense, the Reinheitsgebot beers are almost elevated to that status of this is more pure.
Yeah,
Not to be
it's
too
more
literal about it.
classic. This is
Yeah,
the old way. Yeah.
this is the old way. Exactly. That's a great way to put that, and it's really fascinating.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Um, all right, so on to my beer. If you can't tell by looking at the glass right now, it is very
Beautiful.
good. Look at that lace. I've almost finished this already in just the 8 minutes we've been talking or whatever. It's fantastic. I forgot how good this beer is. I look forward to Oktoberfest every year. Then I forget about it all September. And then right around now is when I'm like, oh, yeah, Oktoberfest. And then I start drinking these beers and I'm happy.
The beauty of that lace is that it's in its nature. The inherent nature of that lace is that it's thin,
Hmm.
which is something that is markedly different than what we've experienced as beer drinkers coming up in the last 20 years in the U.S. Coming out, forget about the macro beers, that's a different story. But like in the microbrew scene, you look at some of the largest, they call them microbreweries, but um, Boston Beer Company is an example. Whatever else we've seen, they haven't been doing that kind of stuff. So people have experienced a lot of other things, and then you sit down, and you have one of these beers during Oktoberfest, and you go, "Fuck, this is really great."
Yeah.
What's so different about it? What's exciting? It's not a whole lot, but the thinness, not on the head but in the body, is key. And that's the
Yeah.
crispness that you get from a. What they took is classic pilsners, and they took the crispness of a pilsner and put it into a body of a beer that is more accessible to the average person outside of the pilsner. Like, I want a darker beer. I don't want a red ale. I don't want a brown ale. It's too sweet or it's too hoppy or whatever else. And you have these beers: Dunkels, Marzens, Fest beer. Very excited. Anyway, I could talk about it all night. But
And
it's
for this one, I mean, it's a little less bright orange than it looks in the picture. It's still fairly light. It looks like a more intense Pilsner.
yeah,
It's
just
a,
about. It's like a Pilsner Plus.
yeah, like a Pilsner Plus. But then,
Sure.
the flavor of it is way more than a Pilsner. There's a lot
Oh
more
yeah.
sweetness up front, and then there's like that intense breadiness. And there is a noticeable amount of hops in here. I feel like a lot of German beer, I drink it, and it tastes like they forgot the hops, you know? It's just there
Yes.
as
Yeah.
as just a little to add that little bit of balance. Um, and this one's got like just a tiny bit of hop kick to it. It's not an IPA. It's not going to blow your socks off or anything, but it just has that little bit of extra bitterness, and kind of, again, kind of like the cigar, citrus note. Um, as far as the pairing, I'm finding that breadiness is working really well with this cigar. Like you were talking about, the cigar's starting to ramp up a little bit. Um, I do have to say, I don't think this cigar is going to make it to the end of the show because it's
Same.
smoking a lot faster than most of
Same.
the stuff we smoke on here.
Yeah.
We kind of make it a point to not smoke small ring gauge stuff on the show because it goes by too quick. Um,
But this is the
but
magic thing with this cigar. These cigars with this kind of profile, and you think about, for me, a lot of the Cuban cigars that I really love, they end up being that like Werther's original quality to them.
mhm.
Mid cigar, second or final third. You know, you get to that point, it's got that intensity of a Werther's, the full flavor, it covers your palate, and it sticks to your palate, and it's that caramel, little bit of that sweetness. Not much. It's not a whole lot of sweetness, but just enough to carry that bread flavor forward.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah, I
really cool.
agree. How's it working with your Mardunkel?
Well, I will I will say, on one side yes, on the other side yes. So on the one side, which is, me being that I made this beer, it's my baby. She my baby. I ain't gonna talk bad about my baby, but I think sincerely, I think it works really well as a style. I would absolutely recommend Dunkel for a cigar like this.
All right. All right, time to move on to our second pairing. I am I'm moving on up to our second pairing because I've got something a little on the special side. I was going through my liquor cabinet and I found this. Um, you could probably tell by looking at the top that this is a very tiny bottle. I was just trying to
God
hold
damn
it
it!
in a
I
way
thought it
that
was a much bigger bottle.
no, this is a little
When you
50
hold it up
milliliter
close, it looks like a bigger bottle.
airplane bottle. Um, it was a gift that was included in a cigar package many years ago.
Oh,
Um,
it didn't come with your flight.
no,
Okay.
and I got uh, I mean, I had it and I drank maybe half and left the other half and forgot about it. So I was digging through my liquor cabinet, like, what am I going to drink tonight? What would go well with this cigar? And I saw this and I was like, this seems like the perfect cigar to try that with because it's not something super intense. I'll be able to taste the whiskey a little more, um, and it won't be wasted. So I'm going to talk about Johnny Walker a little bit. So Johnny Walker was originally, it wasn't actually even created really by him, but John Walker, um, he was originally he he was 15 years old, and his parents, I believe, died, and he got some investors and decided to open a grocery store with wine and spirits, which is wild. This dude's 15. By the time he was 20, he was mostly focused on the spirits side of things. And so customers would come in, they would ask for a whiskey. He would say, "What do you like as far as flavor?" And he would blend them a Scotch whiskey out of a bunch of single malts he had. And he would just kind of blend it to customer preference. Over time, he gained a reputation for this. So eventually he started writing his name, Johnny Walker, on the bottles that he would sell, and just kind of made a name for himself locally. So in 1857, I don't remember if I mentioned this was the 1820s. So in 1857 he passed away, leaving the business to his son Alec Walker. At this time, at this point in the story, whiskey is said to have been about 8% of the store's income. So Alec spent pretty much his whole life building up Johnny Walker. He was the source of many of the kind of lasting changes that would end up where we are today, still being around. In 1860, he introduced not just the signature square bottle, which he did because it reduced the amount of bottles that broke in transit on a carriage or on a ship or whatever. But it also you could just fit them better in a box, and that was just a kind of utility innovation that really stuck and really became iconic. In the same year, he also introduced the angled label that is apparently I think it was a 24-degree angle, that it's always 24 degrees. And this was also the first year that, because of a change in Scottish law, you were kind of allowed to sell a blended whiskey as a product. So all in the same year, he introduced all these changes. He started blending whiskey, selling it as a series of consistent bottled blends. So he had a couple of different versions of Johnny Walker's Old Highlands. And when he passed the business to his sons, which was around the 1890s, his sons Alexander and George, whiskey was about 90 to 95% of their sales. So over the course of, what is that, 50 years? 30 years. About 33 years. It completely changed the face of this company. From being a shop that sells whiskey to being a whiskey company. Just a few years, so I said that was around 1890. In 1893, the company bought Cardew Distillery so that they could use it as the primary whiskey in the blends. They bought Cardew and they stopped selling their single malt. All of their production went straight into Johnny Walker. So at that point, it was already a juggernaut. In 1909, and I should mention, at that point, it was still Old Highlands. It said Johnny Walker on the label, apparently, but I couldn't find a picture or anything or an illustration of what it looked like at that time. In 1909, they rebranded, adding the, well, he's not even on here. Oh, he is. The Striding Man, who's been redesigned a couple times over the years. And they renamed the three whiskeys that they had from, I think they were Old Highlands. It was like Extra and Extra Old or something like that. But they renamed them to Johnny Walker Red, Black, and White. And so they had those three whiskeys in 1909. And, I mean, the white has kind of come and gone, but the red and the black have always been there ever since. During the first part of the 20th century, this is where I'm speeding up my storytelling because I didn't want to spend the whole time talking about Johnny Walker. But in the first third of the 20th century, Johnny Walker acquired a bunch of new distilleries, including Colburn, Clonelish, Dalwhinnie, Talisker, and Mortlach, among a couple others. What?
I'm a big fan of Clonelish.
Oh, me too. Dalwhinnie as well.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And they again, once again, same as Cardew, they bought these distilleries for no reason other than so they had more whiskey that they could get consistently, which is wild. Just a few years later, in 1925, they joined the Distillers Company, which we of course know because in 1997, Distillers Company turned into Diageo. So these days they're owned by Diageo. They are still a juggernaut of Scotch whiskey, the biggest selling blended malt in the world, or blended Scotch whiskey in the world. They're not a blended malt anymore. Yeah, and The rest is history. So Blue Label. Let's talk about that. It was first released in 1992. It has never had an age statement, which is wild.
Yeah.
In 1992, it was $150, which is inflation has not hit Johnny Walker Blue very much apparently, because it's still like 180 to 200
Well,
in most places.
to be fair, that's a Diageo, the buffer. The Diageo buffer
Fair enough.
fixed a
Fair
lot
point.
of things.
But it $150 seems like a lot less money than it did in 1992. But in 1992, it was the most expensive whiskey on the market. I assume there were more expensive whiskeys that you could get at auction and stuff like this, but this was the most expensive thing you could buy that was in production still. That wasn't some whiskey from the 60s that nobody's ever heard of or something. The crazy thing is it bears no age statement. There's never really been any information officially on what is in Johnny Walker Blue that makes it so expensive. They say their little blurb for it is it's blended to recreate the taste of some of the whiskey blends of the 19th century. So they're trying to make it taste like it did in the 1800s, but you know, you got to assume that in the 1800s whiskey was probably pretty bad.
It was. We know from accounts we've had historical accounts that it was not. In today's world, where we talk about the refined quality and the characteristics of a whiskey, whether it's Scotch whiskey or otherwise, it's not nearly as refined. It was not back then as it is today.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
In the 32 years that Blue Label has, or 28 years rather, the Blue Label has been on the market, there have been over 30 different limited editions of it that range in price from around the same price as Blue Label to a lot more than normal Blue Label. There have been reports of what goes into it, which is it's said that most Blue Label contains at least some whiskey from Ghost Distilleries, which is a distillery that was making whiskey. They closed down, but they still had whiskey in barrels. So they sell that whiskey, and buyers can age it for as long as they want before they bottle it. It's also been reported that whiskeys in the Blue are aged a minimum of 28 to 60 years. But that sounds pretty far-fetched to me for a whiskey that's $150.
You're talking like bourbon myth quality there.
Mm-hmm.
Bourbon lore, if you will.
I would say if it was 18 to 30 years, I would believe that. But I've only got a tiny little pour left, as you can see. So I'm going to take a couple sips, see how it pairs with this MOFOH. And let you tell us about what you're pairing next.
I've got an interesting pairing that is very near and dear to my heart, but is a homegrown, another beer. Basically, I would say homegrown. It's another beer from Odd Duck Brewing Company, which is the beer is titled officially. It's titled Maybe Guinness.
You had this last week, right?
Did I do Maybe Guinness last week?
I think so. You did something about Guinness. Unless you have multiple Guinness clones.
I thought I had all non-alcoholic.
Oh, sorry, that was 2 weeks ago, maybe 3.
2 weeks ago, yes. Okay. All right. Fair.
My bad.
Yeah, so this is Maybe Guinness. Well, it's been sitting for a while, so I dare I say we're not going to look at the head on this and the retention, but it is a nitro poured Guinness clone, if you will. I've done 2 clones. This one is, when my neighbor and I, when we brew, we basically get down and he makes a beer, I make a beer. So we end up with 2 beers in one session. We end up with two different beers. We go into, two different kegs. So this is the beer that he brewed when I was making my Dunkel. He made this one. And this is an homage to the Guinness magic, if you will. If you love Guinness out there, it's the Guinnessy sort of magic. The interesting thing when I talk about Guinness, I always bring up the whole Hershey's thing. You're familiar with the Hershey's thing at all?
Oh yeah.
For those of you that don't know, the Hershey's flavor, the classic, that little bit of difference that Hershey's milk chocolate has from a lot of other milk chocolates is that they, well, historically, if you look at it, the vats that had the milk, they had so much milk in such a big vat, and it sat for a good bit of time that it started to sour just enough. It soured just enough to affect the flavor of the final milk chocolate, making it iconic, right? Is the iconic Hershey's milk chocolate flavor. If you get Hershey's and you get another chocolate, you'll taste the difference. It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, when I talk about stouts, I think Guinness really stands at that level of Hershey's kind of funk. And part of that is acidulated malts. Like if you want to talk about it, it's like lactic acid, acidulated malts, a little bit of funk to it.
The famous
But
fish guts, right?
yeah. For clarifying, fish guts were a part of that,
Once
which
upon a
is
time.
I don't know that they actually use that anymore. I think they've
No,
switched to.
they've switched to more modern methods, I believe.
I think they're using like Irish moss. They're not using isinglass. Isinglass was the fish guts thing. They used isinglass for years, and I think it's probably now like Irish moss or adjacent.
Mm-hmm.
Probably more actually chemically at that scale. I think chemically adjacent now. It's very pure. But dude, holy shit! Guinness has been making beer since 1759. Talk about old stuff, right? I think we have a theme for this show.
It's old beer.
Arthur Guinness. We've talked about this. You've talked about this as well. Arthur Guinness signed that 9,000-year lease for the St. James Gate Brewery in Dublin. At the time, it was only 45 pounds. I don't have the conversion of what 45 pounds was back then, but it's not a whole lot. Like
I think
it's
I
not
did
that.
the math,
Oh, you
uh,
did? Okay.
and I believe it was like 5,000 ish pounds in today's money for a year.
Which is not a whole lot. I mean, at the end of the day,
I mean, it's nothing. That's
considering what it is, what it's become, right? As
that
we
couldn't
know
pay the
today.
electricity bill in most production
Yeah.
breweries.
Guinness is also famous for pushing this campaign, which is Guinness is good for you. This was a big deal. This is one of the things I think that got Guinness into the mainstream of people's minds. They saw these slogans of like, yeah, Guinness is good for you, right? It's like it adds to your health benefits. It's got a sizable amount of calories and other things for your day, so you can almost like. When I grew up, I remember Guinness was kind of like, yeah, it's a meal. It's a meal in a glass. And that's what it was for so long. But actually, Guinness doesn't have that many calories. It's about 125 ish, right? Depending on the Guinness that you drink. But the classic Guinness about 125. But man, I love them so much for the history of beer that they've been a part of.
Yeah.
Like they were the first. Really, they were the first to innovate nitrogenation in their beers. We know this because they have the patent for the widgets that go into the cans that allow for a really unique draft experience. When you get a can of Guinness, almost I think all I don't want to say all,
Yes.
but like
Everything
all,
except like the export stout.
yes,
Their some of their more specialty beers that aren't the classic Guinness stout. Don't have widgets, but everything that's normal Guinness stout does.
they do, which is it's amazing. It's a thing that didn't exist. They made this, and now it just kind of we drink it and we forget about the history of it. Guinness was also, by the way, did you know, was the first beer sent to space? In 2011, they sent Guinness to space, which is amazing. But also, it was an experiment. If you may not realize this, but Ardbeg
Oh yeah.
was supporting this project to study how those flavors mature in a zero gravity environment. So like, yeah, Guinness, great. Let's send it. Let's. They sent other stuff. Obviously, they sent whiskey, but they wanted to see what kind of space zero gravity would do to a Guinness. And that's kind of
Was there any results from this research? Because
it
that's the
was
one thing I've
very
never heard is if
yeah.
it did anything.
We never heard a whole lot from kind of what happened, what the results were. Um, but if I may, the Guinness World Book of Records, as we hear it and we know it, was created in 1955 by Sir Hugh Beaver, and this is in fact tied to Guinness. So when you hear Guinness Book of Records, it is the Guinness. It is the beer that you see in stores
It's
everywhere.
the
It is
same Guinness.
the same Guinness, man. And in today's time, St. James Gate Brewery produces something like 3 million pints of Guinness every single day.
Wow.
Three
That's a lot of
million
beer.
pints a day. They ship it out to over 150 countries, which is amazing and incredible. And like from a as someone that brews beer, and I sit at home, I do my thing and whatever. It's amazing to me to think about that scale. It's the scale. It's dealing with the logistics of multiple countries and different laws
Mm-hmm.
across nations and shipping laws and everything else. I'm like, holy shit, man. It's a big deal. So to that point, I think it's a beautiful homage to be able to make a clone of that in respect and love for a beer that we all know. And my hands were not directly in the process. I was there for it. Right? I was in the room where it happened, so to speak. But I think it's fantastic. Like the clone, it worked out really well. We have it on nitro, which certainly helps. A lot of homebrewers generally don't have a nitro
Yeah.
setup to do all that. And we're fortunate enough to have that. And like, yeah, man, this beer has been Guinness, very Guinness happy. I guess I should say the ABV on this is a little bit higher than classic Guinness. I think it's 4.6. Guinness is around 4.2.
4.5, 4.3, something
Well,
like that.
well, 4.2 in the U.S. It's a little bit higher outside the U.S. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So if you have Guinness in the Caribbean, let's say you go on vacation, it's going to be a little bit higher, potentially depending on the country. Some countries go the other way, and it's significantly less. We've seen this with whiskey and with rum.
Mm-hmm.
Like in Nicaragua, or you go to the Dominican Republic, you go at 38%. That's weird.
Some of them are
Why?
as low as 35.
Or 35. Why is it not 40?
I don't know.
Bureaucracy.
Can't
Bureaucracy,
explain
that's
it.
all it is. Yeah.
Science can't explain it. All right, Johnny Walker Blue. I got a little drop left. This is one of the softest drinking whiskeys I think I've ever had. It's like it reminds me of a Macallan with just like a drop of Lafroig, just enough to give it a hint of peat. Um, but it's really more that like sweet honey kind of flavors that you get from Macallan. But if it this is a thing I do not say often because I hate when people say it. You can't even taste the alcohol. Like you could tell me this was 30% ABV and that you did some magic to make it still taste like whiskey, and I would believe you. Like it's very, very soft on the palate as far as the alcohol burn that we're used to. It's like
Yeah.
it's almost confounding the way that it's just so different from most whiskeys that I've had. That being said, it goes wonderfully with this cigar.
I Man, Johnny Walker is one of those things. I find that it's very divisive. In sitting in bars and meeting people and chatting with about spirits and things. I feel like Johnny Walker is one of those things where self-proclaimed whiskey folk kind of they kind of shit on Johnny Walker and say, "Oh, that's garbage. It's
Mm-hmm.
blended whatever shit, macro, right? Macro whiskey, if you will." And to a degree, I think for a long time I felt that way as well. But until Hurricane Sandy hit my parents' house, completely flooded like beyond the second floor of the house. And my parents had a bottle of Green Label that's been there for, I don't know, probably as long, almost as long as I've been alive. It's just been sitting there. And in helping them clean up, I distinctly remember seeing this bottle covered in mud and whatever else, and I pulled it up and like it was sealed, and I kept it. And I don't know if it's the like where it came from. It's a story of it came from Hurricane Sandy, or if it really was that good. But man, that bottle was fantastic.
Johnny Walker Green is very good.
It was so nice and so pleasant. And I was a naysayer from many years, so I came into it thinking like, oh, it's gonna be fine. I'm not gonna think about it. And I had to stop and really sit down and enjoy every sip that I had from that bottle. And
Yeah, I think one of the really interesting things about blended whiskey is that with a single malt, there are rough edges. There are pretty much always going to be rough edges. Maybe they're not rough for you, but they're rough for somebody else. Maybe they're not rough for other people, but they're rough for you. But there's going to be uh, rough edges, whether it's the harshness or that you're like, that has a little too much peat for me or whatever. And blending whiskey was created to solve that problem. So you could get kind of the best of both worlds. Johnny Walker has spent 200 years perfecting that. So they got to be doing something right. That being said, Red Label is garbage. Oh, that stuff is rough, man.
Oh, you mean the people that drink Red Label?
Both.
Every Red Label drinker, and excuse me, it's not to knock anybody's choices, but I found there's a correlation with people that drink Red Label, their general societal quality and ability to coexist with other folks in an intelligible manner as an adult. That I find like there's a discrepancy there, and it seems there's a very strong correlation of like, okay, I see. Red Label, double, on the rocks in a plastic cup. Yeah. I know you're not
I
the
know
person
exactly what you're
moving on
saying.
through the night. If something goes down, you're not the guy. I mean, certain things, yeah, maybe certain things that go down, sure, I'll call on you. But if there's a matter of import, you're not going to be the guy. Sorry,
Yeah.
or girl, or whoever.
I will say, Blue Label, if you have a chance to buy one of these little bottles for anything reasonable, I think in some places these bottles are like 30 or 40 bucks for an airplane bottle, which is like, no, don't pay that. Are you crazy? But I've seen sometimes one of these for like $25, $17. If you're looking for something fancy just to try it, I'd recommend it. It is really good whiskey.
Wow, $5,000 first class ticket on a Middle Eastern flight will get you one of those bottles for free.
Probably.
Small price to pay for a small bottle.
How's your Guinness working with this cigar? I could see like I'm finding chocolate notes in the cigar that I think could work really well with that Guinness.
I've always said since the beginning, first taste, I've said, man, this particular one, the maybe Guinness, has an interesting twang of vanilla that classic Guinness does not have. And I really enjoy that. I really love that about this beer. I love that it's a little bit different. It's not true Guinness. Um, I don't know. I think where the Dunkel sits with the sweetness, the Guinness doesn't have that sweetness, and it's not bringing out some of those extra flavors that I really liked about the cigar.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling like more sweet is better, at least at this point, halfway through the cigar, for me.
More sweet is more better.
Yeah.
I like that. All right, time to move on to last pairing. I went with something kind of different that I don't know if it's going to work or not. This is McCarthy's Oregon Single Malt. I'll hold up the bottle there. There's a lot of words on there.
What is that? Jeez. I've never seen that before.
I've had it on the show once or twice.
Maybe.
So it says Clear Creek Distillery. That's kind of a brand name under Hood River Distillers in Oregon, based in Hood River, Oregon. So this was first released in 1996, making it the oldest American single malt. Isn't that wild?
Is that true though, or is it one of those like
the first single malt since Prohibition?
All right, that's fair. All right.
I don't think any were produced
single malt
at all after Prohibition. But this is currently the oldest single malt in the United States. They make it, as I said, in Hood River, Oregon, but they use 100% peat malted barley imported from Scotland, which is pretty rad. It's This is a bottle from a couple of years ago. It says on the back that they use Widmer Brothers Brewing Company does their malting for them,
No shit. Okay.
or rather their fermentation for them. I mean, I don't know if that still goes on because I think Widmer's gone. Not positive about that.
I think they were absorbed at some point.
Yeah, so they may still be
Like,
making it in the same facility, but it may have a different
yeah,
name. I don't
yeah,
know.
they exist. I think it's just a different name.
This is the standard McCarthy's. They also have one that's a 5 or a 6 year age statement. This one is 3. But one of the interesting things is it's aged in Oregon oak. So this is not aged in American white oak. It's aged in Oregon oak, which I don't think makes it much different, but it's still pretty neat. And it comes in at 42.5% ABV, which is a weird number to be bottling at. But you got to think some thought probably went into that. 43 was maybe too hot. 40 wasn't what they wanted.
Well, at that point, also because you're adding water back to cut the barrel proof.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it seems crazy. To your point, it seems crazy. Like 0.5% doesn't seem like a whole lot, but actually, at scale, it's kind of a big deal and affects the flavor profile.
Yeah, that's true, and it affects your profits because if you cut a little ABV, that's X amount more bottles that you can make per year
Sure,
for the same price.
that's a good point.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a couple sips of this, see how it is, see how peaty it is, because the last time I had it was with a stronger cigar. If I remember correctly, it might have been. No, I don't know if I've had it on this show at all, actually. But I remember having it with a stronger cigar that really got blown out by the flavor. So I will take a couple sips of this and see if I can taste the peat in it this time. As you struggle, riding the struggle bus with that cap.
No, I done been open this. It's fine. You know this.
Hell yeah.
We all know this. We know and love this. Florida Caña 18. I couldn't resist with a kind of Cuban inspired cigar. I could not resist jumping on that bus, and man, there's so many things to be said about Florida Caña. Outside of the fact that just the experience of you and I when we first experienced, we had our first sip. Likely was it together? I suspect it was the first time. You and I first tried Florida Caña together, and we were never really rum people. I was never very much into rum. You were not as well.
I had never tasted a rum I liked. The only rum that I ever liked was a rum and coke or like a frozen rum cocktail or something.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I was very much in the same boat where I really didn't gravitate to rum from a spirit perspective, and spirit being that I'd want to pour this over ice or in a glass or just have it by itself. Forget about cocktails and everything else. It's a different world altogether, right? But man, when I tried Florida Caña, there was something to it, and I think you feel the same way. It had a certain magic to it that was, well, I mean, really very much like the bourbon. I've called it the bourbon of rums for years.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it has that bourbon quality to it, that stickiness to it. The stickiness that is distinctly different than what you would expect with a rum that's very sweet. Generally, the sweet rums, like you think Bacardi makes, a variety of rums.
Oh yeah,
They're kind of sticky and sweet. That was never my thing. I wanted something that had some legs to it. Certainly, this has. Well, you might not be able to see it.
Hold it up a little higher. There you go.
There we go. You can't see the legs on it.
No, not quite. That's a cool Lafroy glass, though.
That's it's a little baby Lafroy from Burns Night from earlier this year.
Nice.
So Burns Night. Anyway, Florida Caña was established in 1890, which is another old brand, which is pretty cool. But what makes them really distinctly unique in terms of rum is that they basically come from volcanic soil. This is the San Cristobal volcano in Nicaragua, which is really cool. The soil, the climate, all that minerality of the water contributes to the flavor of what we get. It's distinctly different than when we have Caribbean rums, whether they're industrial rums or agricultural rums. The minerality of the water is a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, holy crap! They've done a bunch of cool stuff. They've been around forever. They are really, I think, officially, I think they're the first like carbon neutral and fair trade certified rum to exist.
I believe so. I think I read that
Before
somewhere.
before that was a thing. That purportedly that's what they say, and I believe that. I absolutely believe that in them. Um, but what's really interesting is also they don't add anything else. They don't add sugar. They don't add artificial flavor. They don't add color. Now the color thing, listen, it's on the fence, right? You can argue yes or no. They don't specifically state there's no added color, but I would suspect there is not. Like
Yeah,
I'm leaning on the side of probably not.
it's hard to tell.
It is hard to tell, yeah. But Florida Cognac has been a staple for. If I'm having a cigar, 90%, 85% of the time, I'd say I have a bottle of Florida Cognac. I'm gonna go for that.
It's when you have a cigar and you need a drink, Florida County is hard to pass up. If you have it on hand, it's getting hit in that rotation more than everything
Oh,
else.
for sure, for sure. I think, and also Florida Cognac. To be fair, if you are a bourbon drinker, and you are, for me growing up with cognac, I have consumed lots of cognac, like family events and things. I grew up with a palate for cognac, but a lot of people haven't. And a lot of people that are bourbon drinkers kind of don't know how to approach a cognac or a rum. This is the perfect intermediary to get you into that space. Florida Cognac is a good mix between bourbon and cognac. It has that body to it. It has a little bit of sweetness. It has the fullness on the palate, which is buttery.
Mm-hmm.
Which for a lot of rums, it's not buttery. A lot of rums are just kind of they hit you. They
It's
hit
just
you hard.
full speed sweet.
It's full speed sweet. It's got the alcohol bite to it. Florida Cognac has a finish, like a long sort of extended finish on it, very similar to cognac. So if you're a cognac drinker, I would say Florida Cognac would be a really great alternative. Certainly the 18. I mean, I love all of them, but the 18 I think is a really great um, everything rum, if you will, for me.
Yeah, the 18 is fantastic.
Yeah, man.
I always talk about the 12 as my favorite because it kind of has the most oomph to it. But the 18 is fantastic. I think the 18 goes better with kind of more medium bodied cigars. And the 12 goes better with full bodied cigars. That's where I'll put
Yes,
it.
absolutely agreed, wholeheartedly. Yeah, and generally, I find that now that I've explored rums, um, I love Florida Cognac, but I find that I don't gravitate toward industrial rums as much. Florida Cognac is the reason why I wanted to explore rum, and I found agricultural rum,
Mm-hmm.
which is subtle, it's floral, it's distinctly unique. I really enjoy that as well.
Yeah, Florida Cognac is an industrial rum, but because of the way that they distill and age it, it doesn't really taste like it.
We got some, we got some people in the comments over here.
That's my father-in-law.
Hey, Fenner. Thanks for
Um,
joining.
all right, McCarthy's Oregon single malt. This is peatier than I remember it because, like I said, I've had this with a couple of cigars that were on the more full-bodied side.
Yeah.
This cigar being like medium plus, I get a lot more of that peat, a lot more of those delicate flavors in this whiskey. I'm trying to think of what's there. It reminds me of Talisker with a little more sweetness,
Oh, interesting.
if
That's
that
a good
makes
way to
sense.
put
So it's
that,
got
actually.
like that little bit of peat, that little bit of sweetness, that
Yeah.
kind of one of the flavors that I always get from many scotches is hard candy, like kind of that. Werther's Original Jolly
Oh,
Rancher
like
kind of sweetness.
the Belgian hard candies or Belgian sugar.
What's a Belgian sugar?
It's a beer thing.
Okay. All right. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know anything about it. But this cigar is working really well with this whiskey. I'm struggling with what my pairing of the night will be. How's Florida Cognac working with this thing?
Oh, it's fantastic. I almost want to say this is the pairing for the cigar. I would argue to say
All
this.
right.
Now the beers are fine. It's not that they're bad. Generally we have distinct like this is good, this is not good, or this is better. This is one of those nights where I think for me the pairings are very close, but then Florida Cognac takes it to the next level.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out what my pairing of the night is, and I'm kind of the same boat where it's like the Varstina worked really well with the first third because it's got that bready note, that subtle sweetness. Then the Johnny Walker was just so good and brought out kind of those chocolate notes in the cigar. The McCarthy's is really bringing out chocolate notes for me. I think it's that smoke,
Oh
like
yeah, I bet.
brings out this intense chocolatiness in the cigar, like really dark chocolate, which I wasn't expecting at all from this cigar. I think I'm gonna go with McCarthy's, but it's kind of a toss up. What do you think of this cigar before we get out of here?
Halfway through, now that I'm more than halfway through, once I hit the middle mark, that's when I really started to enjoy the cigar.
It really started picking up for me too.
Oh yeah, I mean,
That point.
it reminds me. I mentioned this in the green room. I love Bolivars. I love the Bolivar Coronas, the Petit Coronas. Just fantastic. And I think this embodies that Cuban spirit in such a great way. That's really cool. And it's a nice change of pace. To be fair, it's smoking a lot of heavy Nicaraguan stuff, heavy Pennsylvania stuff, Mexican tobacco. Um, it's a nice change of pace.
Yeah, I agree, and I really could see people who like the fuller bodied side of Cubans. I think would enjoy this. This
Oh,
is
for
not. It's not going to be a cigar for everyone, I don't think. But it's a. What's the thing that people call it sometimes? It's a connoisseur cigar. If you smoke a lot of cigars and you really like a mix of intense and delicate, this cigar fits that bill perfectly.
Oh, for sure. I can see that. Yeah. My Florida Cognac, I struggle. For like Florida Cognac, I struggle all the time.
To not
Because,
drink it all? Is that what you're saying?
no, well, I struggle because I distinctly remember multiple times sitting at the airport in Nicaragua on a flight out when I have time to kill and I'm in, the little room, the little back room they have at the airport where you can smoke and drink.
Mm-hmm.
And sitting in that room with a cigar, drinking Florida Cognac before my flight, and going like, this is the experience. This is it.
A Florida Cognac and a Tonya. That's my before flight regimen.
And well, Florida, yeah, exactly, yeah, Florida Cognac and Antonia, and then something from Esteli generally. Uh, it, it's so hard to describe that experience,
Right? I agree.
but it's magical, and I love Florida Cognac for that. It's the history, and I think maybe in that sense I have a little bit of a I'm leaning more toward it because I've been fortunate to experience the magic that is Nicaragua.
Yeah.
But dude, everybody that I've turned on to Florida Cognac loves it,
Me too.
adores it. In fact, this bottle that I'm holding right now is not my bottle. It's my neighbor's bottle.
Did he leave it there and you're just
Well,
taking a little
no,
off the top?
I ran over to the pole barn and I grabbed the bottle. We have a
Ah,
collection of things.
nice. Nice. I love it. All right, I guess that brings us to the end. It's time to get out of here. But first, we always have our one for the road where we tell you about something that we've been into lately. Dennis, I'm going to let you go first.
You want me to go first? Oh boy. Well,
I mean, I can go first if you need to think. I think I went first last week, and I'm trying to go back and forth.
no, there's not a whole lot of thinking on my part. You know, I feel almost kind of bad because I've been leaning on a certain theme for
Yeah.
a couple weeks now. But you know what? I think maybe some people need to experience this theme. They need to experience the magic of what this really is. And you know, I'm wearing this ridiculous '80s stringer thing, right? I want to bring you back. You remember the movie 1989 Tango and Cash?
Oh yeah, of course.
Sylvester Stallone, Kurt Russell, just like wow, it was nuts. And there were other people. To the man with the chin, I forget his name, but he was in what was he in? He was in a famous shit. You know who I'm talking about, right?
I don't.
No, it was the guy with the. You know who I'm talking about. It's the guy with
Like, you haven't said the guy with the something. The guy with
the guy with the chin. The chin.
Jay Leno, Gary Busey.
No. Oh, Robert Zdar.
Oh, okay.
Robert Zdar. He was in a couple of films, cult classic films. He I forget what disease he had, but he had something that made his
Big
chin
chinitis, I think.
like something like that. But dude, holy shit, super cool. Tango and Cash. Terry Hatcher's in it if you're into that kind of thing. But Terry Hatcher does a great striptease, and I remember like as a kid watching this movie, going, "This is a great film. It's exciting. It's got action. It's got some tech to it. Because you know it has a little bit of comedy. I love that movie so much, and I think you've
It's
seen
a
it
good
recently.
movie.
You've rewatched it. I feel like.
Maybe 8-ish years ago was the last time I watched it. It's been a while.
Yeah, there was so much going on. Like Kurt Russell in drag, which was really cool and kind of not a thing that was. I
Not
don't want to
super
say
acceptable back then, yeah.
not that it was. Yeah, it wasn't like particularly acceptable, but it was really cool that he did that and he pushed through. Um, the chemistry between Stallone and Russell on that set was
Mm-hmm.
you could see it. You could see that man in the movie, and yeah, it's one of those films like I can put it on in the background and just do my thing, and it's just a feel good background film. So Tango and Cash, if you haven't seen it, 1989, check it out. Lots of action, definitely lots of action.
Tango and Cash always reminds me of a an arcade game I played when I was a kid.
Which one?
It's called Lucky and Wild. I think most people have never heard of it. So Lucky and Wild was a game. You remember the light gun games where you had the gun, Time
Sure.
Cop, and all those? So Lucky and Wild was a game where you had the gun, but you also had a steering wheel. And so it was a two-player game where you sit next to your buddy,
Oh
and one of you
yeah,
can drive, one of you drives and shoots, and the other
yeah,
one just has a gun and just shoots. And it was
yeah,
so fun. But I remember it immediately reminded me of like, wow,
yeah.
that's a complete knockoff of Tango and Cash. I
Dude,
don't remember if the game itself is, but the name was.
100% the game was a ripoff, and I remember, what was it? Time Crisis.
Oh yeah, I loved that game.
Time Crisis,
Where
another
you had
game.
the pedal,
Yeah,
so you could duck behind stuff.
yeah. Oh yeah,
Hell
man.
yeah.
Great. What's yours?
All right, so mine is gonna be a book. It's getting to be spooky season.
Oh,
It's almost here. I've been ramping up a little bit, watching some movies, some TV shows, some books. I read a book called The Handyman Method, which is I don't know what I expected because I never know what to expect from a book, but this was different than I expected. So it's about a family, a husband, wife, and child that move into a brand new house. They just had it built. They basically walk in, and the husband opens up his closet, and there's a big crack in the drywall. And his wife says, "Just call the guy, and he'll send someone to fix it." And he goes, "No, I got this. I can fix it." And he starts watching this guy on YouTube that shows him how to fix it. And then, without giving much away, it escalates in many ways. Basically, you pretty quickly find out that some kind of energy in the house is making him compulsively repair things. So it's mostly in his point of view, first person, and he's like he goes to Home Depot and he's like ogling the like side cutter kind of wheel cutter,
Oh yeah.
rotary cutter, but like getting way too into it. Like I don't know what I'm going to use this for, but I need it, and it just kind of becomes this obsession that starts affecting his life very negatively, and eventually affects it a lot more negatively. It's kind of a different kind of haunted house book, which I thought was really interesting. And it's just really well written, really creepy, and I could not put it down.
You are describing, I think, in a lot of ways, a film called Stay Tuned. Are you familiar with this?
No.
1992. John Ritter and I mean a whole bunch of people were in. John Ritter and what's that guy's name? Ah, shit.
I wish I knew.
Jeffrey Jones. There we go.
Jeffrey Jones is not ringing about. Oh, Jeffrey Jones, noted pedophile Jeffrey Jones.
Yes, I guess now, unfortunately, but yeah. So it was a John Ritter film where he was like an overworked schlub and paid for like a fancy cable system, and when he signed the contract for the cable system, it was actually the devil, and the devil signed him into this contract where he got sucked into the TV with his wife, and they became characters in the TV, but everybody dies in whatever
Oh,
show you're in. You remember this?
I do remember this.
The guy with the eyebrows. What's his name?
Guy with the eyebrows?
Jewish cat with the eyebrows. My man.
I got nothing. I'm drawing a blank on that. Other than what's his name? The guy the director guy, but it's not him.
It's
Guy with the eyebrows. You and your descriptions.
yeah, big eyebrows.
If you can tell me what he was in, I can probably
Levy.
name him.
Eugene Levy.
Oh, okay. Okay. Guy with the eyebrows makes sense. Never mind.
Yeah, it's the best I got. So it's Eugene Levy was in it. Jeffrey Jones, David Tom, Heather McComb was in that, which is crazy, but yeah, it was cool, man.
I'll have to check that out. It sounds familiar, but I'm not positive I've actually watched it. So I'm not sure. But yeah, Handyman Method. Check out that book. Really good kind of horror thriller kind of book. It doesn't get too intense, I don't think. So even if you hate horror, it may still be up your alley. Check it out. All right. Well, this has been the Fabrica5 MOFOH. Check out these cigars from Fabrica5. What do you think about the price point on this? $12? Seem reasonable?
Yeah,
I agree.
Absolutely. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, go check out the cigars. They ship from the U.S., so they're pretty quick. There's some confusingness to the site, being that you're paying in Australian dollars because you're paying Australia, even though it's shipped from the U.S. It's a whole thing. But either way, recommend them. Fast shipping, good company to deal with. And very good cigars. They pair with a lot of different stuff really, really, really well. This cigar was a pairing dream. All right, everybody. Well, that brings us to the end. Talk to us next week when we'll be back with a new cigar that I'll hopefully have decided well in advance, but we'll see if I get busy again. So thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for doing all this stuff. Dennis, give him the catchphrase, and then we will call it a night.
I'm going to leave you with this. Robert Starr had a disease called cherubism, which is a congenital disease for the lower face, lower jaw, I guess. But don't be that guy. And remember, we want to drink better, but we want to drink less.